So then I want to welcome everyone to this Sabbath meeting. And we are so thankful that you're with us today, Wayne, and that you got early up for us. And today you're going to speak with us about Daniel and the Adventist Health Message. And I love the health message. So, yeah, the time is yours. If you please can start with a prayer.
Sure. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much, Lord, that we can meet from around the world. We can meet with people from all over. We just pray that your Holy Spirit would be amongst us today. Guide and direct me as I speak, Lord. And I pray that everybody that hears this message, not just on live now, but through YouTube, Lord, or whatever other channels, we just pray that they would be blessed and that they would hear your voice speaking to them. In Jesus' name, amen. Let me just once again just introduce myself. My name is Wayne Kostolni. I'm actually a retired dietitian. So I used to work as a registered dietitian. I worked in Army hospitals for 30 years. And over that time, I learned more and more about the health message. And it really just became part of who I was. I'm going to focus more on the dietary aspect of it. When we say health message, it encompasses more than just diet. But I will focus mostly on the dietary portion of this. But exercise obviously is important. Water is important, and I'll highlight a few of those things. As I get about halfway through, I'm going to open it up for interaction too, because I'm going to give you the biblical foundation first. Then we're going to talk about the scientific foundation of what's in the Bible. And when I get to that portion of it, I'll let you know. And at that point, I encourage interaction, because I teach better when I'm in a group setting and you can see people's faces. It's a little bit more of a challenge when you're on Zoom like this, but I'll let you know when we open it up. So anyway, I titled this "Daniel Speaks on the Health Message," and the Bible is full of promises, and just tells us in Psalm 119 or 139 verse 14, it says, "I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well." When you look at the human body and the intricacies of the human body, it's amazing. And I'll talk about a little bit about that as I get into the scientific portion of this. But we have a lot of specialties in the medical field now: neurology, nephrology, cardiology, but the body is not just different segments, it's one whole, and they all work together. And the way God has designed us is just absolutely incredible when you start learning about the human body. And there's so much to learn that even the medical field recognizes that, and doctors specialize in one area, because you just can't get all the information in your head for the whole body. It's so hard. All right, and we know this verse. Some of this stuff will be review for some of you good Seventh Day Adventists. But in 3 John verse 2, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth." So God wants our soul to prosper, our spiritual, being, but He also wants us to physically prosper. And Jesus said the same thing in John 10:10. "I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." We need that abundant life. It's hard to praise God when you're sick and you're struggling and you're not feeling well. And so, God wants us to prosper in that way. I'm going to give you some American facts. I don't have the information for the European countries, but I'm sure maybe not quite as bad as America. But, 3/4 of Americans are overweight, and, probably 30 or 40% of those are obese. So we have big problem with overweight. Blood pressure, a third of Americans have blood pressure. And then you have, 38 million pre-diabetics. Just to give you an idea, in America, the last time I looked at, the population, I want to say it's around 320 to 340 million people in America. And so when you look at almost a third of Americans have pre-diabetes, that's a big number. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in America, with cancer number 2. And a lot of these are preventable diseases. And the health message that we teach, especially the dietary aspects of it, can actually help to reverse a lot of these things in most cases. Obviously, the older you get, the harder it is to reverse things. But the human body wants to heal itself. And so when we make changes, God will bless us, even at an older age too. But once again, we do a lot of damage to our bodies, and sometimes the body cannot completely heal itself. God will heal us all one day, but maybe not in this life. More teenagers in the U.S. are coming up with what is known as type 2 diabetes, and I actually worked as a certified diabetes educator for about, I don't know, 10, 12 years, the last years before I retired. So I taught a lot of diabetic classes. And so I can talk a little bit about diabetes, pre-diabetes too. So when we get to the question answer portion of that. All right. So a lot of people fear this, they're afraid of the scale because the weight just comes on. 1 pound of body fat contains about 3,500 calories, and so it doesn't take a lot. If you just eat 100 extra calories a day over the course of a month, I mean, you'll put on about a pound of weight. And so losing the weight, it doesn't usually come off as fast as it comes on, but the excess weight leads to a lot of medical problems. All these medical problems, I'm not going to read through all these, but the blood pressure, the heart disease, even some cancers are a result of just carrying extra weight. Every pound of excess body weight that you carry, body fat, actually your body has to produce another mile of blood vessels. And here's some facts for you. You may or may not know this, but the human body has about 60,000 miles of blood vessels. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that seems like an awful lot of miles of blood vessels. Well, most of that are the small little capillaries that feed and nourish individual cells in your body. So you cut yourself and you start bleeding, it's because you've cut blood vessels, and those blood vessels are tiny. Matter of fact, there are some blood vessels in your brain that are so small that blood cells have to move through single file. I want you to get that in your mind for just a minute. Blood cells, which if you took a pin and you put blood cells on that pinhead, you could fit about 250 blood cells on that pinhead. And these blood cells have to move through some of these blood vessels in the brain single file. And so if your blood is clumping up for whatever reason, when Ellen White made the statement that sugar clogs the living machine, what happens in the body when you eat too much sugar, your blood gets thick and it doesn't move through those thin blood vessels very well, because your triglyceride levels may be going up with a high sugar diet. And so I'll talk about some of these things as we get into the scientific portion of it. But we truly are fearfully and wonderfully made. So let's go to the book of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verses 9 and 10, I love these verses here. It's at the end of the book, and the angel's talking to Daniel. He says, go your way. The words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And so the book of Daniel, we think of the book of Daniel as just prophecies. Well, there's more than just prophecies in the book of Daniel. Matter of fact, when I first came into the faith, I got hold of some tapes, and some of you may remember the name Erwin Gain. He was actually a religion teacher at Pacific Union College in the days that Desmond Ford was at Pacific Union College. I got there a few years after the Desmond Ford crisis, and Erwin Gain was no longer there, but somehow I got hold of his tapes. And Erwin Gain was someone who stood up against Desmond Ford and was advocating the true message of righteousness by faith, the heavenly sanctuary. But these tapes by Erwin Gain that I got hold of, there were 16 studies in the book of Daniel. And he divided the book of Daniel into 7 stories and 7 prophecies, which I thought was kind of interesting. And he would advocate that the 7 stories are probably even more important than the 7 prophecies, because the stories tell us how we should be living our lives in the last days as the prophecies are occurring. And so I thought that was a very good way to divide the book of Daniel. And obviously, the first story in the book of Daniel is in the first chapter. And I'll just highlight that a little bit. But when you think of Daniel chapter 2, most people think of the great image. The Nebuchadnezzar has this dream, but you don't get to that actual portion of the dream until you get to verse 39 of chapter 2. There's a story in chapter 2 about the Daniel and his friends who went to the Lord in prayer, and they sought God in prayer, and God answered their prayer. So you can pull stories even out of Daniel chapter 2. But in Daniel chapter 1, there's an obvious story in there, because we're told in Daniel chapter 1, after these young men had been taken captive to Babylon, that the king wanted to do what he thought was best for them by giving them the best food, the best education. And so in Daniel 1, verse 8, Daniel purposes in his heart that he's not going to defile himself with the portion of the king's meat. So obviously Daniel and his friends knew what was going to be fed to them, but they purposed in their heart, and they didn't want anything to do with the wine which he drank. And I'm assuming that was fermented wine at that point. Now, he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. We know the story. It's very familiar to a lot of us, but there may be some people that watch this that are not familiar with this story in the book of Daniel. So Daniel stood fast. He said, you know what? I don't want to eat the stuff that the king wants to feed me. I'm sure some of it was good food, but Daniel knew some of what was coming. And so Daniel makes a request of I forgot the gentleman's name, but he says, hey, give us 10 days. Basically, give us 10 days and give us pulse to eat and water to drink. So Daniel proposes a test. And it's interesting because years ago, I was listening to a doctor who was not a Seventh-day Adventist, but he would advocate whole plant-based foods as the foundation of your diet. And this medical doctor, said that after 10 days, you start seeing medical improvement in people when they change their diet to a whole plant-based diet, whole plant-based foods. And so right away, my mind went to the book of Daniel. Wow. So Daniel was asking for a 10-day test. And here we have a doctor who is actually confirming that in 10 days, you start seeing medical improvement in people who are really sick. And they change their diet. But he requests pulse to eat and water to drink. Now, most modern translations of the Bible will just translate that word pulse into vegetables. But if you just eat vegetables only, you're not going to be a very healthy person. You won't get enough calories. You won't get enough protein. Your diet will not be balanced if all you eat is vegetables. And so when you read the NIV, you read all the different translations, even the New King James Version translate it as vegetables. But what this word truly means in its original sense is foods of plant origin. Leguminous foods, legumes like beans and nuts and seeds and fruits and vegetables. So it encompasses more than just vegetables, the way it's translated in most Bible translations these days. But also I want to highlight here that Daniel requested water to drink. Sometimes people, drink all kinds of things besides water, but the human body needs water. So when people are drinking soda and lemonades and teas and those kinds of things, the body's really asking for the water, but we're giving it in different versions. Now, I'm not against drinking other things from time to time for a little taste. There's not a problem with that, but the foundation of what you drink should be water, because that's what the body needs. Most interactions or most processes in the body actually happen in water. So at the end of the 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. And so now keep in mind that these young men had just marched across the desert too. And so, obviously when they started eating better, they're going to appear fairer and fatter. But after Daniel and his friends ate, what they had requested to eat, they actually looked a little bit better than some of the other people. And in Daniel 1:17, as for these four children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And this is interesting, in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. Now, how they actually measured that they were 10 times smarter, I'm not exactly sure, but obviously they did a whole lot better than some of the other people that they were being compared to. And remember what I told you about these small blood vessels in our brain. I'll highlight that in a little while as we get to a little bit further along in the in this presentation today. Now, this is from the Spirit of Prophecy. I can't see the top of my screen, so I don't see the reference, but it says, this was from Councils on Health, but it says, the history of Daniel is placed upon record for our benefit. He chose to take a course that would make him singular in the king's court. He did not conform to the habits of the courtiers in eating and drinking, but purposed in his heart that he would not eat of the king's meat nor drink of his wines. Now, notice, this was not a hastily formed, wavering purpose, but one that was intelligently formed and resolutely carried out. So Daniel, when he purposed in his heart, he had thought this through ahead of time. Think ahead to the book of Daniel in chapter 3, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are facing the burning fiery furnace. And in chapter 3, verse 17, they said to the king, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. In other words, we've thought this through ahead of time. And so Daniel had thought this through ahead of time. And Daniel was probably ready to die if he had to, in order to make sure that what he put in his body would bring glory and honor to God. And there's a lot to be said for the first story in the book of Daniel has to do with diet and temperance. And we as Christians need to take our lessons from this book. Remember Daniel 12 and verse 10, the wise shall understand. And so in the book of Exodus 23:25, we're told, and ye shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. And so God promised the Israelites, I'm going to bless your bread, I'm going to bless your water, and I'm going to take sickness away from the midst of thee. And then we know this promise in Exodus 15:26, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which is right in his sight, and wilt give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. Now, they've done studies with Egyptian mummies to find out what diseases were the Egyptians suffering from. And it's interesting because a lot of the diseases of Egypt are the same diseases that the Western world is suffering from today. The heart disease, the obesities, the cancer, those types of things that we suffer from, they were found in Egypt. And God has promised that if we're obedient to him, if we put him first, if we purpose in our heart to do what's right in terms of our body, because what are we told in Romans 12 and verse 1? Paul says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And so in Romans 12:1, God doesn't want us to be dead and dying. He wants a live sacrifice, a living sacrifice. And that starts with how we take care of our bodies and our mind. And then this question, can you die before your time? I mean, can you shorten your life? And obviously the answer is yes. I mean, you take someone who goes out, gets drunk, and then crashes their car and dies. I mean, that was not God's purpose that person die at that time. That person shortened their own life. The thing with our diet is, in Ecclesiastes, we see this, why shouldest thou die before thy time? But with diet, the problem with diet is it's not a fast death. I've used the expression many times in my classes, and I heard this somewhere, but we're digging our graves with our teeth or our mouth one bite at a time. And so it's a very slow process. But the good news, as I mentioned earlier, is that the body can reverse a lot of these things that our body may be suffering. There's no guarantee. So people, I've seen many, many people over the years that come into my office and there's fear in their face because they've been diagnosed with cancer. They've been diagnosed with diabetes. And sometimes these things can't be reversed because people are too far along, and genetics plays a big role in things also. You can take two people, feed them the same exact diet, and one person gets heart disease and one person doesn't. I've seen many people over the years who were so obese and they didn't have a lot of medical problems. I'm like, why does this person not have heart disease and diabetes? And so the genetics plays a role in this too. We just don't know personally, what our genetics might be as we're going through life. And genetics is what I call like a loaded gun. You don't have to pull the trigger. So if you have genetics towards heart disease, cancer, diabetes, it's not a foregone conclusion that you will get those things. You have to pull the trigger, and the trigger is lifestyle. Are you eating right? Are you exercising? Those kinds of things. All right. And this is Spirit of Prophecies again, counsels on health. A misuse of the body shortens that period of time which God designs shall be used in his service. By allowing ourselves to form wrong habits. Now notice habits. Habits take a while to form. By keeping late hours, by gratifying appetite at the expense of health, we lay the foundation for feebleness. By neglecting to take physical exercise, by overworking mind or body, we unbalance the nervous system. Those who thus shorten their lives by disregarding nature's laws are guilty of robbery toward God. We have no right to neglect or misuse the body, the mind, or the strength which should be used to offer God consecrated service. Now, I don't want people, I don't quote these things to make people feel guilty, because if we all look at our lives and the things we've done in our lives and we're honest with ourselves, we have all neglected ourselves to a certain extent, whether it be poor sleep, poor lack of exercise, not eating right, and eating habits they're very hard to change. I've seen that over the years. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as I get to a few more slides here. But I don't want people to walk away from this day, feeling guilty, because God is very merciful and God is willing to forgive and take us where we are and use us to his honor and his glory in whatever way he can. So let's keep that in mind when we look at some of this. In the Garden of Eden, man was tempted first where? On the point of diet. And so when the serpent came to Adam and Eve, diet is just something that we do all the time. We eat all the time. And the serpent knew that he could get to Adam and Eve through diet. And that's why when Jesus came, his first temptation in the wilderness, he overcame where man failed in the Garden of Eden on the point of diet. And this was after a 40-day fast. And when the devil came to him, tempting him to command the stones to be made bread. And so we know that that was a huge temptation for Jesus to do that. When God placed man in the Garden of Eden, what was man told to eat? So I want to, kind of talk now a little bit more about the food aspect of this, the health message. But in the Garden of Eden, it was a vegetarian diet. Now, there's different types of vegetarian diets. So I want to kind of specify what God actually told man to eat in the Garden of Eden. God said in Genesis 1:29, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth. Now, basically, plants bearing seed, and seed is key here. Let's look at the next verse. And every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. And so, King James is using that word meat for food. But the key here is seeds. So you can eat seeds and you can eat the flesh surrounding seeds. And so when you look at plant-based foods and you look at nuts and seeds, I mean, basically, if you take a cashew nut or you take any kind of nut and you plant it, it will grow. It's a seed. If you take a bean, a legume, and you plant it, it will grow. It is a seed. Now, there are some seeds that, we're not going to digest and not do well with. I don't eat apple seeds, but I eat the flesh surrounding the apple seeds. So there are some seeds that are edible and some seeds that you're probably not going to eat. So God in the Garden of Eden created, just think about the wisdom of God. He creates a planet that can sustain itself through seeds. You just plant the seed and it grows, and more things will grow that we can eat. It's just amazing. Even when we get to the new earth, let me just jump forward here. In Isaiah 65, 22 and 23, the Bible says, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. They're going to build houses and inhabit them and plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. So what are we going to eat when we get into the kingdom of heaven? And I've asked people this over the years many times. When you walk through the pearly gates into the kingdom of heaven, there's no more chicken nuggets. So what are we going to be eating in the new earth? We're going to be eating things that God designed us to eat, plant-based foods that grow. So we know the story in the Garden of Eden that there was sin. So when you get to chapter 3 in the book of Genesis, God changes up the diet slightly in Genesis chapter 3. In verse 17, he says, you've hearkened to the voice of your wife, you've eaten of the tree that you weren't supposed to eat from. And then it says, verse 18, thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread till thou return unto the ground. After sin came in Genesis chapter 3, God added vegetables to man's diet. So prior to this, vegetables were not in the diet. A lot of things that we consider to be vegetables are technically fruits. I mean, if you take a pepper, whether it's a green pepper, red pepper, I mean, we consider those to be vegetables because they're not very sweet, but technically they fall into that fruit category because they have a seed inside of it. But at this point, God added herbs to the diet of mankind. And it's interesting because in Genesis chapter 22, the tree of life, which bears 12 manner of fruits, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. God knew that vegetables have some healing properties in them, and so he added them to man's diet after the fall. And so we find that in Genesis chapter 3. It was only after the flood that you can find permission in the Bible to eat meat. Now, the spirit of prophecy plainly tells us that people were eating meat prior to the flood, but God's permission to actually eat meat did not occur until Genesis chapter 9. In Genesis chapter 9, beginning in verse 3, God says, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. But the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And verse 5 is so interesting. And surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require it. So here in Genesis 9, just after the flood, God is now giving Noah permission to eat meat, but he's telling them, number one, don't eat blood. And unfortunately, a lot of the meat that people are eating today still have the blood in it. Even the clean meats that people in the church eat too. I discovered this after many years that the blood is still in there, and so it has to be drained out. I'm told that if you eat meat that really has all of the blood drained out, it'll taste like your belt, like taste like leather. Doesn't really taste so well. But verse 5, where God says, I'm going to require your blood at the hand of every beast that you kill and that you eat. What is he saying here? Well, those tapes that I listened to on Daniel, I love the way he described it. he says, something to the effect, I'm going to allow you to start eating steaks and those kinds of things. You're going to enjoy it, but it's going to shorten your life. And so could it be that God in his mercy shortened the lifespan of man? Because can you imagine a Hitler or a Mussolini or some of these dictators that would live 900 years? And so when you look at the lifespan of man, prior to the flood, Methuselah lived 969 years. Sometimes people read the Bible and they think this has to be like a fairy tale. There's no way someone could live 969 years. But when you look at the lifespan of man, this slide here, what you basically see, each line that you see on this slide represents 100 years of life. And so what you have is you have Adam, Methuselah, and Noah. Those are the three big, tall guys up there. Methuselah is probably the one that lived the longest. But then after the flood, you can see Noah standing there with the ark. But after the flood, you'll notice the lifespan all of a sudden dropped down to like 600 years. And the only thing that changed was the diet. And so the earth had changed. And so the diet of man had changed. And then if you look down at the last small person down there, that's you. You're probably not going to make it to 100 years. Most people don't make it to 100 years. And if we do, we're usually pretty frail if we make it that old. And so after the flood, we saw a change in the diet and a dramatic decrease in the lifespan of man. And God gave man permission to eat the meat. But once again, it's going to shorten your life. In Psalm 84, verse 11, the Bible says that the Lord God is a sun and shield. He'll give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. So God does not want to withhold anything from us that's for our own good. In Psalm 103, starting in verse 2, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases. Notice verse 5, who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like the eagles. So God has given us so many good things to eat on the earth. So here is where I want to transition a little bit and talk more about the science portion of why is it that a plant-based diet, why is it that the original diet that God gave to man is the optimal diet for a human being? And if you make changes towards that from wherever you are right now, because I understand diet is one of those things that is very personal and it touches us multiple times a day. And dietary habits are very hard to change. And so as I get into this portion of it, I want to kind of open it up now to questions. I have a lot more slides that I can go through, and I have some slides in here to trigger some discussion too, because I do much better when there's give and take, and I'm answering questions just to kind of know, because I can't really see your faces. I have to stare at my camera and my screen. So I really don't know how people are responding, what they're thinking right now. But usually if I have a classroom setting, I can read people's expressions. We live in a society today where people get a lot of chemicals via medication. And God has designed the foods that he wants us to eat. There was a doctor, I think he was a Greek doctor, Hippocrates. He said, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. And there are some doctors who have actually discovered this. Some doctors have discovered that there are chemicals within the foods that we eat that act like medicine in the human body. And those foods are in the plant-based foods. You don't ever hear on the news that they discovered new chemicals in your cut of chicken or whatever it is that's going to help lengthen your life. You usually don't hear that. It's usually, oh, they've discovered some chemicals in blueberries or in eggplant. And it's these chemicals that are found in the plant-based foods that act as medications inside the human body. And that's what Hippocrates many years ago actually discovered. So the American diet is designed for disease. Now, I'm going to speak on the American diet. And when I was in the military, in the Army, I used to meet a lot of soldiers and family members that lived in Europe for a while, Germany specifically. And they would say, Europeans are usually a little bit better in terms of eating fruits and vegetables than Americans are. And I'm sure some of you people today will confirm that to me. But Americans struggle to eat a balanced diet. And when I say the American diet is designed for disease, I truly believe that Satan has inspired the American diet in terms of all the processed foods. And I've heard many doctors describe some of the foods we eat as food-like substances. They're not really foods. If you can take a food and you can put it in a crinkly bag and it'll sit on the shelf forever and ever and not go bad, that's probably not what God really designed us to eat. Now, those things are good in emergencies and for convenience sometimes, but if that's the foundation of your diet, you're going to run into problems in terms of health. So the whole plant foods is really what I'm going to advocate that most people eat most of the time. Doesn't mean that there's not leeway in people's diet to enjoy a few things, that we deem maybe not the best for our health. But real foods is what I really try to focus on. And as I went through my years of being a dietitian, I really learned that what was missing in most people's diet was the fruit group and the vegetable group. So when I would analyze people's food records to see what they were eating, the first thing I would zero in on, are you eating vegetables and fruits? And usually the answer was no, not nearly enough. And this is usually where I like to have give and take, but I would always ask the question, how many servings of fruits and vegetables should the average person eat per day? Because whether you're American or European or Australian or Asian, doesn't really matter. The human body is the human body. 9 to 12 servings a day are optimal from the fruit group and the vegetable group. And people kind of get, thrown back. The American government or the US government recommends 3 to 5 or like 5 servings a day. Typically 5 servings a day are not enough to have the type of health that you really should have to keep the chronic diseases away. 9 to 12. Matter of fact, the foundation of what you eat should be fresh vegetables and fresh fruits. The other stuff you add in, the starchy foods, not a problem. And I'll talk about starchy foods in a little bit and what constitutes a quality starch versus a processed starchy food. But real foods or whole foods is really what I would advocate. Let me talk a little bit about phytochemicals and antioxidants. A phytochemical are chemicals that are found in those plant-based foods. Scientists have discovered, they estimate there's about 10,000 different phytochemicals. They don't even have names for all of them. I'm just going to give you just a couple examples. And I haven't taught these classes in years, so my mind isn't as sharp as it used to be in terms of recalling some of these. But there are chemicals in fruits and vegetables, and I don't have the names of them, but they actually help to lower blood pressure. And so people that have high blood pressure, when they would come to me, the first thing I would ask them is, how many servings of fruits and vegetables are you eating? And you get the typical answer, usually, 3, 2, some people none. Some people considered the lettuce and tomato on their burgers vegetables, and that was their fruits and vegetables for the day. And so I would challenge people, what I want you to do, and it's not going to happen overnight, you start bumping up your intake of vegetables and fruits and start decreasing some of the other stuff. And over time, your blood pressure should come down. Now, it doesn't come down in all cases. Some people are way too far along. But I've had many people come back to me after changing their diet and adding the vegetables and fruits in, and all of a sudden, now the doctors are starting to lower their blood pressure medication. Why? Because there are chemicals in those foods, like, for instance, celery. Celery has chemicals that help to lower blood pressure. And when you eat a piece of celery, if you're one who salts everything that you eat, you probably can't bite into a piece of celery and actually taste the salt in there. But if you're not one who is accustomed to adding salt to your food, you should be able to pick up a leafy green vegetable and start chomping on it and taste the salt in it, because God has put natural sodium in foods as well. And so once you get used to eating more of the natural foods, you can start tasting the differences between them, but the chemicals in there are key. There are chemicals in red fruits and vegetables. So I think of tomatoes, I think of watermelon. These lycopene, I don't know if you've ever heard the term lycopene, but lycopene does a couple really good things in the body. Number one, it increases the thickness of your cell walls. So all of your body cells have a wall. It's kind of like a fortress to keep things out. Well, lycopene will increase the thickness of that cell wall, and it helps cancer-causing agents from getting inside your cells and causing cancer. Oh, really? So every time you eat a tomato, you get this little protective effect. Broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, what we call the cruciferous vegetables, have chemicals that when they get inside your body, they trigger chemicals to be produced inside your body that fight off cancer for 2 or 3 days. So I like broccoli. I eat broccoli, but I don't want to eat it every day, right? So when I eat something like kale or broccoli or Brussels sprouts, cabbage, these things give me a protective effect that could last for 2 or 3 days. So God put these chemicals within the foods that naturally take care of our body. Dark colored fruits and vegetables like eggplant, plums, black grapes, red grapes, they have chemicals that decrease cholesterol production in your liver. And so there are these natural chemicals, they're called phytochemicals. An antioxidant is a phytochemical. And so not all antioxidants are phytochem, or all antioxidants are phytochemicals, but not all phytochemicals are antioxidants. What are antioxidants? Well, vitamin C, vitamin E, and these things help to fight against free radicals that are in your body that actually cause cancer. And so all of these fruits and vegetables that God gave us to eat, even when you get to beans, and you look at beans, there's different colored beans. There's different colored fruits and vegetables. So when people will eat a fruit or a vegetable, if they don't like it, that's okay. Eat something else that has the same color. And so it's said that you should try to eat a rainbow every day. And so when you look back at your diet over the course of a day, have you eaten a variety of colors in terms of the fruits and vegetables? Now, should they be cooked or raw? I always would tell people the majority of what you eat should be raw, but it doesn't mean you can't cook any of your vegetables. I would usually advise people, why don't you try 50-50, cook some of your vegetables, but don't overcook them. Cook them, just to, make them a little bit, chewable. Now, if you have problems with teeth and you've lost teeth and you have dentures or whatever, blenders do wonders, for fresh fruits and vegetables. But try to blenderize them and consume them as fast as possible, because oxidation begins occurring as soon as you blenderize those fruits and vegetables. That's why the ones in the store, that someone blended it for me, I usually don't buy those. I'll blenderize them myself so that it's fresh when I'm consuming it as much as possible. But anyway, phytochemicals, antioxidants. If you've never heard of phytochemicals, go on Google and learn a little bit about phytochemicals, and you'll find that God really knew what he was doing when he prescribed the diet.
Yeah, so back to Daniel. I was working at a health center for 10 years, and they were there for 12 years, like 12 days. And usually after 10 days, I had this worship about Daniel with them, and I asked them, so do you see any difference in your bodies now after 10 days? And they felt better, blood pressure went down, usually 18 to 20%, cholesterol went down, 18 to 20%, blood sugar went down, weight went down. But some of us, like myself, I have more problems the other way, how to get up in weight. So what are you suggesting for people who want to put on weight?
Well, I tell you, the main thing that causes problems with weight is fat and sugar. So if you look at where people get their extra calories, somehow they're consuming too much fat and too much sugar. And so processed foods. So for someone trying to gain weight in a healthy way, probably more nuts and seeds and avocados, a little bit of olive oil. And I always recommend, when you're using your oils, use the cold pressed olive oil. Let me just explain oils for a minute, because there are three things that cause cancer. And the three things that really promote cancer. Number one is animal protein. So animal protein tends to turn on genetics for people, to turn on the genes if they have those genes for cancer. Animal protein, whether it's from meat or dairy, especially dairy. So cheese is a big culprit for a lot of people. But so animal protein turns on the trigger for cancer. A lack of fruits and vegetables turns on the trigger too, because you're not getting the chemicals that help to fight against cancer. Because if you think about it, a lot of these fruits and vegetables, they're growing out there in the sun. And we think about, skin cancer. Well, fruits and vegetables protect from skin cancer because there are chemicals in there that are protecting the fruit too. And so when it gets inside your body, the other thing that promotes cancer are vegetable oils. So when you take something like corn, and corn is not high in fat. Vegetables are not high in fat. Matter of fact, for someone trying to lose weight, I always advocate eating more vegetables. Take a look at your plate, and the main dish should be the vegetables, not the meat. See, Americans, the main dish is the meat, and then you have the starch, and then the vegetables are in a little side dish, especially if you go to a restaurant. So I would always tell people, no, no, no. The vegetables need to come onto the main plate, and the meat, the chicken, the fish need to be in a little side dish on the side. So it's a totally different way of eating that, yeah, even if you're still eating a little chicken, fish, meat, as long as it's a very small portion of what you're eating and you're eating a lot of whole plant foods, you're going to do well. But for someone trying to gain weight, a little bit of oil on those vegetables is probably going to help, because if you're eating a lot of vegetables, you may lose weight. That's why I would counsel people. But where does the vegetable oil come from? So if you go to the store and you buy a container of corn oil, or safflower oil, whatever it is, I don't know what Europeans buy, I know what Americans buy, but how did they get the oil out of that corn? What they do is they heat it. So they have a process where they heat the vegetable and they extract the oil from it. Every time you heat oil, it tends to become more carcinogenic. So when you go to the store and you buy a vegetable oil that's been processed with heat, and then you take it home and you put it on the stove and you heat it again, it's now been heated twice. And so that tends to promote cancer more readily. If you buy hydrogenated oils, what's a hydrogenated oil? Well, let me just kind of explain fats here. So saturated fats are generally solid, or are solid at room temperature. So if you take a piece of beef, pork, whatever it is, and you cook it and you leave that oil in the pan, it will solidify at room temperature. Even chicken fat will solidify at room temperature, but not quite as hard as the beef fat and the pork fat. That is a saturated fat. It's hard at room temperature. Vegetable oils are generally liquid at room temperature. And so a saturated fat is one that's hard, but they can take a liquid vegetable oil and heat it up and inject hydrogen into it and turn it into a hard fat. It's what we call shortening. And so now shortening, when you take that home and heat it up, it's now been heated 3 times. In the first initial extraction of the oil, then when they hydrogenated it, and then when you take it home and cook with it. And so hydrogenated oils are really a big culprit at this whole cancer epidemic that we have. And so 3 things that promote cancer. Number one, animal protein. Number two, lack of fruits and vegetables. And number three, processed vegetable oils. So when I use any type of oil at home, I'm usually using cold pressed olive oil. And it's really hard to heat that up if you do want to use a little bit of cooking, because it smokes very, very at a low temperature. But a lot of these oils, they process so they don't smoke at a low temperature. But anyway, to answer your question, Eva, again, I would, yes, vegetables are good, but if you eat too many vegetables and you're not eating enough starch and fruits and oils and fats, You're like me. I've always struggled to put on weight too. And that's just genetics too. Genetics does play a role in that.
You know, when I
In
was
fact,
listening to Mammon Wilson, I don't know if you are familiar with Mammon Wilson.
no.
No, he's anyway, he is very much into natural remedies and is helping very many people with serious health issues. And I was asking him once, no, not I was asking him, but there was a person there in the, sitting listening to him who asked this question, what can I do to put on weight? And the first thing he said, well, it could be that you have parasites. And I thought, oh, maybe I have parasites. And I got a long worm out of me, which is higher than me. I got a worm out which was 180 centimeters, and I got lots of parasites out. So I have learned that parasites actually can eat up very much of the nutrition you are eating.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's kind of not in my realm of expertise. But
Right.
there may be some truth to that.
And I was also thinking about Daniel, that he looked so much better after 10 days. And you said, I thought that was interesting because I have understood that Daniel actually was raised with a healthy diet. So I thought, how could he look then even so much better after 10 days when he
Well,
had been on a healthy diet? But you said something interesting. You said that he had been walking for such a long time. He was tired and probably, you could see he was probably weaker because of all the long journey
right.
to
He
that
had
way.
walked across the desert, and I'm sure they weren't treated the best.
Right,
He was a
right,
prisoner of war.
right,
Uh,
right. So
So once again, I
Mhm.
have. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and another thing, uh, I'm not doing it myself. I should probably do it. Just like apple seeds, all these seeds have so much B17, so we should actually try to use it, even if they don't taste so well,
Yeah,
because
I'm sure there's a way you can use them. I'm sure you can go online and learn a little bit about that.
yeah, yeah, because they are
But
bitter
yeah,
and they are, I have learned that they are the best cancer preventing vitamin, actually B17.
right, right. Let me just. I'll just keep talking, and then people, because I have these slides up here for my benefit too, so I remember things that I can talk
Sure,
about.
sure, thank you.
But let me talk a little bit about diabetes, insulin resistance. Insulin is a hormone that's produced in your pancreas. Insulin is like a key that opens up a door. And so the problem with insulin resistance, especially with people that carry excess weight, what happens is some of the fat that we carry as excess weight actually starts clogging up the doorknob, so to speak, of the cell, and the insulin receptors are clogged with fat, and the insulin doesn't work well. And so people that carry extra weight will develop what's known as insulin resistance. And what the body does, the pancreas then will start producing more insulin to try to get the cells to work because the insulin receptors are all clogged with fat. Animal fat is really, really bad at clogging up the insulin receptors. So cheese is a big culprit for saturated fat and animal fat, and that will cause a lot of insulin resistance. But like I said, you can have two people, one person doesn't get the insulin resistance and one does. But what happens is your body can go years and years and years with insulin resistance, and the body just produces extra insulin, but the day comes that the pancreas just says, I can't keep up anymore. And it starts slowing down. And then the blood sugars start creeping up. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, your blood sugars are high. Um, and so the first step of that would be insulin resistance. And then, so diabetes is a disease of excess fat, not excess sugar. And people have that misunderstanding. Oh, I have diabetes. I can't eat anything that has sugar in it. Well, here's the thing, the human body, God designed us with a sweet tooth. And when he put us in the Garden of Eden, he gave us fruit to eat. And so fruit is really what God gave us to satisfy the sweet tooth. But once again, Satan has designed the processed foods so that when you start eating sweets, it's hard to stop. I mean, you start eating sugary stuff and you want more of it because once again, God did design us with that sweet tooth. And once you develop diabetes, Now the body's having a hard time processing that sugar, and it's affecting the blood sugar very quickly. Processed foods, let me kind of talk about fiber here, because fiber is something that's found in plant-based foods. Usually, if I ask people, hey, what kinds of foods have fiber? The answers I'll get, oh, like whole wheat, brown rice. And that's true. There are fiber in those, but beans have fiber, fruits have fiber, vegetables have fiber, and there's different types of fiber. And so the different types of fiber do different things inside the body. Typically, we think of fiber from like grains, like wheat and rye and those kinds of things. That fiber helps, and vegetables helps to keep our digestive system moving. You know, when you eat a food, how long should it be staying in your system? Well, probably about 12 hours. You know, so if you're eating 2, 3 times a day, you should probably be eliminating 2 or 3 times a day. But a lot of people they come to me, they have constipation. And how many times a week do you have a bowel movement? 2 or 3. So that's not normal. So there's not enough fiber in the diet. And fiber is one of those things you can't just get it from a supplement. Yeah, you can go to the store and start taking a fiber supplement and feel better about it. But God put it in the food for a reason, because it helps to regulate blood sugar. And it works much better when it comes from the food versus a supplement. So let me use the example of say wheat or rice. You know, brown white rice, white rice. What is the difference? Well, brown rice still has, I've got to use my hands here a little bit. So let's just say this is the grain, and the fiber is the outer coating on that grain. And so what they do when they process food, they remove the fiber from it and they just use the inner part of the grain, the endosperm. That's the starch. And so if you remove the fiber from the grain, say brown rice, you remove the outside layer, the fiber has been taken off, you just have the starchy inner part. The body can process that very quickly because there's no fiber. And so it tends to raise the blood sugar much quicker. When the blood sugar rises quick, the body doesn't respond with enough insulin usually. It doesn't do as well when it has to squirt out a lot of insulin. So for instance, when you take a piece of fruit and you bite into a piece of fruit, there's fiber in that fruit, and it slows down how fast that sugar gets absorbed into your bloodstream. When you take that piece of fruit and you extract the juice from that fruit, you now have a concentrated source of sugar. But people think, oh, it's fruit juice, so it's good for me. Well, it's very high in sugar. And I'm not saying don't ever drink any fruit juice, but let me just illustrate. If you take a can of soda, Coca-Cola, a can of Coke has, I'm talking about a 12-ounce can. I don't know what they sell in Europe, but it's say a 12-ounce can of Coke has about 9 packs of sugar in it. So if you took like a teaspoon, that's a pack of sugar. A can of soda has about 9 teaspoons. There's 140 calories in that can of Coca-Cola. Or you can use orange soda, whatever you want. Now, if I use Mountain Dew or something, it's going to be a little higher. It's going to be probably 180, close to 200 calories because there's more sugar. But if I take that can of soda and I empty the soda out and I put orange juice in there, my can of soda, which was 140 calories, is now 180 calories. If I put apple juice in there, it's 180 calories. If I put grape juice or cranberry juice in that can of soda, it's 240 calories. So the calories have actually gone up. Why? Because fruit is very concentrated in sugar. And when you extract the juice from a fruit and you drink it, it spikes your blood sugar. That's why we always tell diabetics, if you have low blood sugar, you take about 4 ounces of juice, and within 15 minutes you should start feeling better, because it's going to spike your blood sugar. So if you're one who's drinking a lot of fruit juice, that's not the health message. The health message is to eat the fruit, and when you bite into that fruit, you will get some juice. And once again, I'm not an extremist. I'm not saying never drink any juice. I'm just educating and saying, hey, if you're doing a lot of that, I met a lot of people that thought they were doing well. They stopped drinking soda and start drinking juice, and now they're actually drinking more calories. And when they find out, I can't see your eyes now, but in a class setting, you usually see the eyes start to open wide and the light bulbs are coming on, and people are saying, whoa, I'm taking in too many calories. And all the sweet teas and the lemonades and those things that people are drinking, I just found over the years, people drink a lot of calories. Some people extreme. I've had people in my office that I've talked to, and they're drinking, say, sweet tea. And in the southern US, it's funny, I can judge where someone's from by how much sugar they add to their sweet tea. And when they make a gallon of sweet tea, if they use 1 cup of sugar, okay, that's not that sweet. That's, you taste the sweetness, but some people use 2 cups and some people use 3 cups of sugar in a gallon of sweet tea. I don't know how they could even tolerate that much sweetness. And so a cup of sugar has about 750 calories. And so if you're making say a gallon of lemonade, I'm talking to Adventists here, right? So a gallon of lemonade, right? And you put 2 cups of sugar in there, there's 1,500 calories in that gallon. And sometimes I would look at people and say, if you were the only one drinking out of that gallon, how long would it take you to drink that? And people would look at me and say, I would drink it in a day. And so now I can quantify, you're drinking 1,500 calories right there by what you're drinking. And when the light bulbs come on, people start making changes when they see what it's doing to their body.
There is a hand now, brother.
Okay.
Teacher, please.
Yes, regarding the insulin resistance, you said, if I'm correct, too much fats can cause it. I don't know how to reproduce it, but the intake of too many fats can make that your blood sugars will go in spikes because the pancreas. There was something with the pancreas.
Okay, yeah, let me just explain that again. So when people carry extra weight, and usually they've accumulated more fat on their body with the excess weight. And so what happens with that excess fat that the body has accumulated, some of that will start coating the cells in the body, which inhibits the insulin receptors on the cell, and that's what insulin resistance is. The receptors on the cell are coated with fat, not necessarily from what they've eaten, but their body has extra fat in it. So,
okay.
Okay. But what I said was saturated fat, animal fats are really, really bad at causing insulin resistance. But if you're eating too much olive oil and you're gaining too much weight, you may still have insulin resistance.
I have the same problem, I think, as Eva, but I'm facing terrible weight loss with candida and difficult to digest fats. So how can you help the body?
Yeah, that's that's a tough one. I'm not quite sure the answer to that. I know there are some medium chain triglycerides that you can buy that are easier to digest. So if it's a digestion issue, and your body's not producing the lipase enzyme to digest the fats, then you may need a lipase enzyme too. But that's a little bit more outside my realm of expertise.
Okay, so you're not on the enzymes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Because when your food gets inside your digestive system, all kinds of enzymes are being released in there to digest the carbohydrate, the protein, the fat. So
teacher, maybe I can share something. I have been to a health center in Germany 3 times now, and he said I have not absorbed nutrients for years because my stomach acid has been too weak. And I have been asking and praying and wondering why have my stomach acid become so weak? And I know that it gets weaker the older we get normally. But some years ago, I was buying this coning machine, and they said, it's so wise to run the water on 8.5 in pH, and I think that has probably done something to my production of the enzymes in the stomach. So I'm taking some digestion enzymes to break down the nutrients, and I have managed to put on some weight. So that might be a suggestion for you, Sitica.
Yeah, I already do the enzymes quite a bit of time, but I'm still only 43 kg, so my height is 1.75. So I'm really, and it's not improving. So I thought, well, I can at least ask if there's something that could help. But
sure,
yeah, it's a real struggle.
I would focus on, especially when you're eating your meals, getting more of the starchy foods and adding some oils as you can to, say your potatoes or your guava or not your starchy sweet potatoes, whatever. Add a little bit of olive oil to it if you can to get the calories up. Avocados, as you can tolerate those kinds of things. Nuts and seeds, nut butters are good too. Good way to get extra calories. So you can make smoothies, with some fruits and some nuts and those kinds of things to get those extra calories too. But yeah, I always found that it was always harder for me to give advice to people trying to gain weight than lose weight, because people that struggle with their weight, it's harder. I found that. A couple words about cholesterol.
I can see that Robert has his hand up. Robert, are you also?
Go ahead.
Robert has his hand up. If you have time, Brother Wayne.
Yeah, sure.
Good morning, Wayne. I got a question for you. When you're talking about insulin resistance, I was thinking that canola oil is really bad for you. And so I went to my doctor and he did like an AC1 test. Is that right? Where they test A1, okay, A1C. And anyway, I told him that I think that canola oil is really bad. He goes, oh no, it's good for you. You should have it, and so I cut it out of my diet, and then it dropped my A1C dropped like 3 points. And when I saw him like 2 months later, and they did another test. But I think it's poison, and it's in everything. Like if you go to the store here in America, they put it in everything. And I thought, that's like a motor oil, isn't it?
Well, no, I think the canola oil comes from rapeseed. So it's a seed, and I believe they grow it mostly in Canada, I believe it. So it's not a bad oil. I mean, but once again, the cold pressed oils are always going to be better than if it doesn't say cold pressed on it, it means that it was extracted with heat. And so it's probably best to use the cold pressed oils as much as possible. But anybody, carrying extra weight is where the insulin resistance comes from. And once again, you can take two people, same diet, and one person's actually heavier than the other, and that person doesn't get insulin resistance. So genetics plays a role too in development of diabetes.
I noticed too that they use a lot of genetically modified rapeseed. Is that correct?
Probably.
And it's like they're not trying to figure out how to make us healthy. That's a given. They're trying to make us sick so they can make money. I mean, it's like an auto mechanic breaking your car when you go in to get one thing fixed, so they get to come back and fix something else next time.
And my advice to people has always been, look, you eat as healthfully as you can. I mean, we can't control everything in our environment and the things that are in the store, but do I buy everything organic? No, but I try to eat so many fruits and vegetables that there is a protective effect, and you pray about it, and God bless the food. I'm doing as best I can in whatever situation I'm in.
When you have really come into a group here, it's really interested in nutrition, just to let you know.
Well, yeah, cholesterol. Let me just say a few words about cholesterol because people have a lot of misperceptions about cholesterol. Cholesterol is a component of every cell membrane in your body. So cholesterol is something we absolutely need, and the liver produces cholesterol. So the body produces cholesterol because you need it. So cholesterol is only found in animal products. Every animal that has cells also has a liver, also produces cholesterol. Cholesterol only comes from livers. So usually when I have a class setting, I'll ask a question and I'll name like 5 or 6 foods that I know don't have cholesterol, but I know most people are going to raise their hand and say they have cholesterol. Like if I ask you, do French fries have cholesterol? Most people will raise their hand, yes. But no, they don't have cholesterol. They have fat, but unless it has animal fat in it, it does not have cholesterol. So understand cholesterol comes from two food groups, so to speak. It comes from meat, chicken, and fish, and it comes from dairy. That's where cholesterol comes from in the diet. The cholesterol in your bloodstream comes from your own liver. And you may be eating things, or you may have things going on in your body that causes your body to make more cholesterol. For instance, if you have inflammation in your blood vessels, and all those antioxidants and those phytochemicals I talked about earlier decrease inflammation in the body. But if you have a lot of inflammation in your blood vessels, what's happening is there's damage happening inside your blood vessels, and then the liver starts producing more cholesterol to repair that damage. And so you go to the doctor and you have high cholesterol, and then they put you on medication to lower the cholesterol when the body is trying to actually repair damage that's going on inside of your blood vessels. Now, some people have high cholesterol because they're just eating bad and their cholesterol is high. If you take a look at like cheese, especially cheese is, I have one word for cheese, and I've used this in many classes. Cheese is a killer because it's so high in saturated fat. It's like milk on steroids. In terms of the animal protein, in terms of the type of fat that's in those things. And so when the spirit of prophecy says that cheese should never be introduced into the stomach, she was probably saying that for different reasons, but I would say cheese shouldn't be introduced into the body. Now, people love cheese, and cheese has addictive properties to it. And I've learned that over the years by listening to some of these whole food, plant-based diet doctors who aren't even Adventist. And they will tell you, all the negative effects. But understand that cholesterol in your bloodstream, a lot of that is coming from your liver, and your liver is producing it. And some people's liver makes more than others.
Very interesting what you shared now about the inflammation in the blood vessels. There is a hand up here. Eivind, please.
Yeah, I have a question about the insulin resistance as well. You mentioned that insulin resistance is when you have excess fat, but when Ellen White in the Health Message recommends like 2 meals a day, a maximum 3 meals a day, does how often you eat sugar and how often the body has to produce insulin, does that affect the resistance as well?
I think it does, but it probably takes more time. So, for instance, when I was a kid, I used to drink soda, right? You go to the store. I grew up in New York. You go to the deli, you buy a soda and a bag of chips, and I look at that can of soda and laugh at it and say, "Oh, some people say this makes you fat," and I was a skinny kid, right? And I would just down that soda. But what my body was doing was my pancreas, no problem. It's going to respond with insulin, and it's going to get my blood sugar back down to a normal level, within a reasonable amount of time. But I would say probably as the years go by, that if you have that type of a lifestyle where you're drinking a lot of sweets, you're eating a lot of processed foods, for instance, what I mentioned earlier about, say, selecting the white rice instead of the brown rice. You're selecting something that doesn't have fiber, and so you get a bigger spike in your blood sugar, and that's going to cause your pancreas to have to respond in a different way than if you eat the brown rice, which has a more regulating effect on how fast the blood sugar goes up. So yeah, I think the more you eat those kinds of bad foods, and as time goes by, and if you have bad genetics in that way, you're going to be the one that says, the doctor says you have diabetes.
Sister Lila is asking, is it possible to have where in the Bible and Ellen White where it comes from? I don't know if she's referring to cheese, or what are you referring to, Lila?
refer to the Bible text and what he said, where he read it from Ellen White, but you don't remember that.
Are
Are
you
we talking about what item? What topic from Ellen White of the Bible? Is it cheese? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's cheese.
Oh, yeah, I don't have that quote off the top of my head. I said, cheese should never be introduced into the stomach. I think that's found in Counsels on Diets and Foods. I definitely recommend reading Counsels on Health. And, Counsels on Diets and Foods is a compilation. And, some people don't like that book. But the advice is the advice. And if we're eating the way God designed us to eat, then those writings don't bother you as much. But at the same time, look, we as humans probably have done things with our body that aren't for our best. And we know that. We can all look back and say, yeah, I was eating this, drinking that, and probably not the best for me. But the human body can heal itself. Now, if you're 70, 80 years old, are you going to have a complete turnaround? Probably not, because, there's a lot of water under the bridge in terms of health issues if you've neglected your body for a long time. Right. Let me, I'll just keep going down. I have a few more slides. Whoops. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So now I talked a little bit about grains, whole grains. I put that word in intact grains. What is an intact grain? An intact grain is something like whole wheat. If you take the actual kernel, that's what we call an intact grain. It hasn't been processed. When you consume more intact grains, that's healthier than if I just say, hey, this bread is made with whole wheat. Okay, well, to make bread, you're going to have to use some processed flour too, because otherwise you're just going to have bread that's way too dense and you can't eat it. But let me illustrate with oatmeal. You may be familiar with oatmeal. There's steel cut oats, there's rolled oats, and then there's instant oats. Right. So what's the difference? Well, the steel cut oats are the little intact grains. They haven't been processed. They've just been cut with some kind of knife, right? Steel cut oats, right? They cut it with steel. And so you have this little nugget that takes about 30, maybe a little bit longer to cook in terms of minutes, right? Now, if you take that grain of oat, that steel cut oat, and you roll it and you process it a little bit, you now have rolled oats. They take 5 minutes to cook. Okay, well, it's still a whole grain. It's just been a little bit processed, right? Now, if you take instant oatmeal, okay, they've gone through the whole thing. They've cut it, they've rolled it, they've processed it. They probably removed a little bit of the fiber. I'm not exactly sure, but it's processed. It's pre-cooked, and all you got to do is throw it in the microwave, and it's ready to go. Or cook it for, just add it to hot water. So the more processed the grain is, the less beneficial it is. When you remove fiber from the grains, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's wheat, rye, oats, barley, if the fiber is removed, there are chemicals, phytochemicals, just inside the fiber coating that also get removed too. And so when you eat that white rice, are you getting something that will keep you alive? Yes, it'll preserve you, but you won't thrive. And so what's happening in the body is you're just getting the starchy part of that grain, but you're not getting the fiber, the chemicals, and even the fat. Like when I was a kid, I used to eat wheat germ. My mother used to buy jars of wheat germ. Well, there's 3 parts to a grain. There's the fiber, the outer portion, the endosperm or the starchy part, and then the germ, which has fats, vitamins, and minerals. And so a lot of times in processing foods, all you're getting is 1 part of the grain, not 3 parts of the grain. And so intact grains are best. So the quinoa, the brown rice, those are best to consume as you can. I realize not everybody has the time to cook those all the time. Greens, I put greens up on the screen here because greens are the most nutrient dense food on the planet. And I'm quoting from some doctor I've listened to for many years. But let me give you an example. If you take an ounce of steak or an ounce of chicken you're going to get about 7 grams of protein per ounce. Now, an ounce is not that big. You know, if you can picture in your mind like a deck of cards, that's 3 ounces. If I cut that into a third, if I give you that much chicken, fish, or meat, you're going to get about 7 grams of protein. And you're going to get about, say, 100 calories. If I give you 100 calories worth of spinach, you're going to get 12 grams of protein. So now most people aren't going to eat 100 calories worth of spinach. That's a big tub of spinach. You know, if you look at that tub and you see, oh, it's got 5 servings and it's got 20 calories per serving, no one's going to eat a whole tub of spinach. But the point is this, that within vegetables especially greens, they are so packed with nutrition. Not only do they have protein, but you're not going to get enough protein from just your greens, but they also have iron, they have calcium, they have, you know, phytochemicals. And so make sure you're including greens in your diet on a regular basis. Should they be cooked or raw? Once again, I think it needs to be a blend in terms of what you're doing. There should be some raw greens in your diet. If you can't chew them, then blend them as you can. And if you're struggling with digestive issues, you know, that's, once again, that's a medical issue, and that has to kind of be handled on a medical level. All
Can I
right.
ask?
There is a hand again, Tisha.
Go ahead.
Yeah, turning to the grains. What about, I don't know if you're familiar with that, sprouted grains?
Oh, I think they're great. Yeah, they're good. Good.
Because if you like that, yeah, for me it is not known what's my problem, but one thing is certain: I lack digestive enzyme producing in my pancreas. So I thought I must eat raw as much as possible, because then you have the living food. And if you eat cooked grains, it's not living anymore. But if you eat them sprouted, you still have the live enzymes as well. So I wondered if that's familiar to you, and if you have something to
yeah. Now whether it helps you with the
with.
digestion. Yeah, I know sprouted is always best if you can sprout them. Most people don't have the time or the inclination to do that, but you know, I haven't researched it extensively. My wife has sprouted some things, and we've used some sprouted things, but not a lot. But yeah, I think they're better.
Thank you.
Any other hands?
No.
Okay. So now I had mentioned earlier, you know, that the human body has about 60,000 miles of blood vessels. That's a lot of blood vessels. And then I also illustrated where I mentioned that there are some blood vessels in your brain that are so small that blood cells have to move through single file. Okay, so what's happening in the human body when someone is eating a diet, say, high in saturated fat and high in sugar, which tends to clump blood cells together? So if you have a highly processed diet, some of your blood cells are actually clumping together. When they get in the brain, they can't get through those blood vessels anymore, and those blood vessels start getting clogged up, and it starts affecting your brain. So when Daniel was 10 times smarter than some of those other people, I think there was a physiological reason for that, because his mind was clear because of what he was eating. And so when we eat the way God has designed us to eat, our brains are actually going to work better. We all know that you have a full stomach and, you know, the brain's just not going to work, but especially the things that we are eating. There was a doctor I listened to online. He's getting a little older now, but Michael Clapper, he was an emergency room doctor for years. And what sparked him to become a whole food plant-based advocate was when they would get these trauma patients into the emergency room. He would actually look at some of the vials of blood, and he could see they were milky white and cloudy. And then when you actually get history from these people, they just finished eating some type of steak meal at a restaurant with French fries and, you know, milkshakes. And so it was actually having an effect on the blood. So that thick blood, when you eat a lot of sugar, it actually increases your triglyceride level, which thickens your blood. And so when you look at someone who has very high triglycerides, their blood is almost like ketchup. So when you try to get that blood flowing through those very small blood vessels that are supplying your organs and your brain, what you have is medical problems occurring. And it's all related to what we're eating. Any questions, comments on that? So once again, I think that story in the book of Daniel has some credence here.
I think I've heard, if I'm right, I think I've heard that the water, that it's very, very important with water so that the red blood cells don't stick together too. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If someone who's dehydrated, not drinking adequate water. And notice Daniel requested pulse to eat and water to drink. And once again, I'm not saying you can never drink something else, but primarily you should be hydrating with water. And it would be best to hydrate between meals. The spirit of prophecy tells us that. Why is that? Because when you have a stomach full of food and the digestive juices are beginning their work, and you start throwing down a lot of fluids into the stomach, you're hindering the digestive process by adding that fluid to the stomach, and you're diluting your digestive enzymes. And so that's what the spirit of prophecy is telling us. People will mock the spirit of prophecy, but she knows what she's talking about, because God designed this body. All right, I'm going to just go through some more slides. And then I'm looking at the time here. We've been going an hour and a half. How long, Eva, till we're done?
Oh, it depends on you.
I'm flexible.
Keep going.
Yeah, people get tired after. I can't go more than 2 hours. I start getting tired. But anyway, what does 200 calories look like? Let me talk to you about the human stomach for a minute. If I sit you down at a table and you are famished, hungry, and I put, say, just fresh vegetables in front of you, and I say, eat as much as you want until you're full. You can only consume between 100 and 200 calories before you're full. So if you're hungry and you're sitting down and you're famished, and I put only vegetables in front of you, physiologically, anatomically, you can only fit 100 to 200 calories inside your stomach, unless they're fried vegetables and you've added butter to them. But just vegetables. If I sit you down and give you fruit to eat, you might be able to get 600 calories in your stomach before you start getting full. Right? If I sit you down and give you French fries to eat, if I take you to McDonald's, I pick on McDonald's. So I take you to McDonald's, a large McDonald's French fries, I think it's 600 calories, right? If I sit down a man who's hungry and I say, here's some French fries, he can eat one of those, no problem. He can eat 2 of those. He'll get through 2. He can get through 3. He can actually get through up to 5 in some cases. So if your stomach, a human stomach, can fit anywhere from 1,800 to 3,000 calories worth of French fries, okay, right away, the body tells us what we're able to tolerate. Now, if you're eating the wrong kinds of food on a regular basis, okay, that's going to create a problem for you. That's why, let me show you a couple more slides here. So what does 200 calories look like? So here's 200 calories. And for those of you that can't see the slide, you just have to wait till it comes out on YouTube. So we have like a little half of a hamburger. We have, part of a candy bar. We have some butter. We have some gummy bears on a plate. But let me show you what 200 calories of fruits and vegetables look like. That's 200 calories. And so if you sit down, could you eat that whole plate of carrots? You probably, you might get tired of the taste, but illustrating once again, why are these things lower in calories? Because there's fiber in them. So God put fiber in food for a reason. It gives us that satisfaction so we don't overeat. And that's why I always counsel people, no, let's just change the proportions of what you're eating for a start. That's the first start. And then we have the exercise issues, right? A fitness center, and you got the escalator leading up to the fitness center. This is probably only in America. Portion distortion. I'm just going to run through some slides before I close this up, and then we'll open it up for more questions. So here, sodas have gotten so large. Once again, you take a 12-ounce soda, you have about 9 packs of sugar in it, But you take that, 20-ounce bottle of soda, it's going to have anywhere from 15 to 17 or 17 to 19 packs of sugar. So it's a lot of sugar that people are consuming. Look at the size of the coffees, and I don't even know what they're selling at Starbucks these days, but I'm sure, 350 calories may not even be enough for some of the coffees these days in terms of what people are consuming. And what's so high in calories? It's the creamer and the sugar that's going into a lot of these things that are really up in the calories. And then even burgers today, look at, so much bigger. They have these monster burgers out now. I don't know in Europe what they're doing, but in America, they got these burgers where they may have to call the ambulance before you're done eating. Pizza, pizza slices have gotten larger. It's just these slides are just illustrating how portion size. I'm just going to flip through these quick. Cookies have gotten larger. Now, what I want to do is just kind of close this up with some Spirit of Prophecy quotes, and just to show you that, Ellen White knew these truths a long time ago. God had revealed these things to her. And let me just show you a few quotes. And once again, counsels on diets and foods. Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods, prepared in as simple and natural a manner as possible, are the most healthful and nourishing. So what is she advocating here? Plant-based foods in their most natural state, simple and natural. So she says we should be preparing foods free from grease. Now, did she mean animal fat by that, or just even vegetable oil? I think people need to be careful even with the vegetable oils. If you're one struggling with weight, you need to even watch the vegetable oils. If you're trying to gain a little bit of weight, okay, some cold pressed olive oil, some avocado oil, whatever you want to use to help increase those calories. The Lord intends to bring his people back to live upon simple fruits, vegetables, and grains. God provided fruit in its natural state for our first parents. So that's what they ate in the garden. And remember, it was things that had seeds in them. Persons who have accustomed themselves to a rich, highly stimulating diet have an unnatural taste. Notice that. And they cannot at once relish food that is plain and simple. I remember having people come in my office. I remember one guy specifically came in my office. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. And the first thing he did was look at me and tell me, if you're going to tell me to eat vegetables, I don't eat vegetables. And so that told me right off the bat that, okay, I knew where he was coming from, and I can deal with that. But I let him know right up that he's at a disadvantage to try to lose weight if you're excluding the vegetable group from your diet. Because why do people not like vegetables? They don't like the way they taste. They're very bland. And so here's the thing. If you have accustomed your taste buds to highly processed foods, when I give you a carrot to eat, it's not going to taste good. When I give you a piece of celery to eat, it's not going to taste good. Not at first. But if you pursue this for a month, all of a sudden your taste buds start changing, and all of a sudden you start tasting the intricate delicacies and the differences between the different vegetables, especially. Now, there are some vegetables I still don't like that much. I will eat them from time to time, just because I know they're good for me. But things like, a lot of people tell me they don't like beets, but I can consume beets on a regular basis. I put them in a blender and make a little smoothie out of it with a bunch of other vegetables, and all of a sudden you put a little lemon juice, lime juice in there, and it tastes good. But you can re-educate your taste buds. But if you give up right away, it's not going to happen. So that's what Ellen White is saying here. They cannot at once relish food that is plain and simple. It will take time for the taste to become natural and for the stomach to recover from the abuse it has suffered. But those who persevere in the use of wholesome food will, after a time, find it palatable. Its delicate and delicious flavors will be appreciated, and it will be eaten with greater enjoyment than can be derived from unwholesome dainties. And so I think that's my last Spirit of Prophecy quote. And I just want to close it up with, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And so, yes, diet is a very hard thing to overcome. Let me just stop sharing here. I'll stop sharing. There we go. All right. So diet is a very hard thing to overcome, but through the grace of God and through the help of Christ, we can overcome anything. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. I haven't been able to look people in the face and see, what the reaction is. But are there any other questions or comments? I see a hand.
I'm thinking it's very important to eat slowly because, many times we eat too fast and we eat too many calories. And also, it's easy to eat between. Some people are eating between meals, and that's calorie bomb, but it's not good at all. And then I also want to address that 90% now. We have talked about nutrition and exercise a little bit, but 90% of disease comes from the mind, right? Overthinking, stress.
Yeah, Ellen White says, say 90% of disease begins in the brain, in the mind. That's true. But for sure, it's what we're eating too, and the way we're living is
Right.
having a.
Right.
I see Lonnie and Abigail have a hand up. That's all I can see.
Yeah. Lonnie.
Yeah, I had a question. Because Ellen White talks about cheese should never enter the stomach. Some people have told me that the cheese she was talking about was the kind of cheese that's aged and hardened, and it grows a lot of mold around it, and they cut the mold off and then they sell you the cheese. But I don't know what type of cheese actually was produced in her time. Maybe I just need to do some research and see if ricotta and cottage cheese and mozzarella, some of the cheeses that are not hardened like that, were on her list of things that we shouldn't eat.
Yeah, for sure. The hard cheeses are definitely higher in saturated fat too. So the hard block cheeses are probably worse for you than some of the softer cheeses.
Like cheddar.
Yeah, well, cheddar is very hard. Yeah, but things like even mozzarella. I mean, it's a little softer, but it's still a good amount of saturated fat. And once again, is it going to clog up the system? It's a possibility. I mean, that your blood cells start clumping together, and the brain. We don't feel the effects of in the brain, but over time it can have an impact. Once again, I have always just used one word for cheese, and it's a killer, and it's killing a lot of people.
Yeah, my husband back in 1819, that time, and he ended up having a heart attack. But I know that was one of the problems. Is I worked as a nurse and I wasn't there to cook, and we had these blocks of cheese, these 2-pound blocks of cheese, and he was putting cheese on everything, and then he ended up having a heart attack. So obviously we don't do that now, but we don't 100% stay away from it, but it's a very small part of our diet. Like I said, we believe in doing what you talked about, having something be the side dish, something very, very small, and the vegetables and the fruits and grains, that's the large amount of our diet.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to look and say, "Hell, my diet is absolutely perfect," and I'm just like, you know what? You could eat a perfect diet and you're still dying. I mean, you're still going down. It's just, the quality of life can change. So I'm a realist, and I used to look people in the face and say, look, 90% of what you eat needs to be good, wholesome foods. And you decide you decide what that other 10% is. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah, it's not sugar for us, or junk food.
Oh, no.
No, it might be a little chicken leg or something like that. But I don't think we can buy that anymore, because we're getting where they're vaccinating chickens and vaccinating cows, and we may have to just eat none of that, zero, not even the 10% anymore.
Thank you, Caroline, for sharing about cooked beans. She's writing here in the chat, cooked beans with avas, fermented garlic in honey on them is yummy. So that's interesting. That we have to try. So when I ferment garlic, I just take garlic and put them in honey and let them stay a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and then they are fermented and they keep for a long time.
Oh, I've never tried that. That sounds interesting.
I do a lot of vegetable smoothies, and I'll put fresh ginger, fresh garlic, fresh, onions in there, and it gives it flavor. That's really what gives it flavor, along with some lemon juice or lime juice, and that's a good way to consume vegetables if you have a hard time chewing, especially.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to add something on. You said that you probably would have to give away with the chicken because of the vaccines. That kind of supports what Ellen White was saying, that as closer to the end of time, there are animals that are considered clean that will become unclean. And I think it's
right.
probably because of like vaccination, as you say, and these farms, they're where the bone feet of the chicken break under them because they are so big, too fast, and this fish nets where they just feed the fishes all kinds of bad things for them to grow, and like the salmon to have a redder color in the flesh. I think that is something that can make the clean animals unclean to eat.
I think it was interesting. I have been asking this question too. Some people are saying it's sin to eat meat, and Sister Wise says it's not sin to eat meat. But as you are saying, I have been wondering. There is blood in it, and if there is blood in it, can you say that it's sin then?
Well, it does say that, because I think it was the story, what was Saul, or there was something in the Old Testament there where Saul was doing something to his soldiers, and they didn't have time to process the meat correctly. They ate it with the blood in it, and it was called sin. And so but people just kind of ignore that, and it is, you go out and buy chicken in the store, it's got blood in it. Um, and that's where disease is in the blood. That's why God told the Israelites not to eat it, because blood gets passed into disease. But I would always tell people, if people had, I've been in the Seventh-day Adventist Church for a long time, and I know cheese is one of those big things. The pizza tastes so good, it smells so good, but 2 hours after I eat any pizza, I regret it. My stomach's not acting right, and so I avoid it for that reason. But if someone were to ask me, should I eat a little piece of fish or should I go have pizza? I'd go eat the fish. Okay, eat a piece of fish. If it's lower in fat, it's probably not as bad for you. But once again, it's just choices we make. And hey, 90% of the time, the foundation of your diet should be whole plant foods. I saw another hand go up.
Yeah,
I thought I
Carolyn.
saw one.
Well, I was trying to remember where I read it, but Ellen White had said that she would rather see you eat a piece of meat than to eat eggs, milk, and sugar together.
That is in there.
Yeah. And of course,
Yeah.
soaking the meat, if you're going to do it, well, there are Adventists who eat it, not me, but if they do, to soak it in salt water overnight and get rid of the blood first.
Oh, okay, that's good. I never heard of that. That's good. That's good advice. Yeah. So look, we are fallen. We're not always, we all have issues that we deal with and we struggle with, but God is merciful, and once again, He wants us to take care of our bodies in the best way possible. And for everybody, that's going to be a little different in terms of how they handle it.
Amen.
Any other questions?
Right. And there's no more hands here. So,
Okay.
but thank you so much. It has been very useful, and I hope that we can do more.
I'll close with the word of prayer.
I hope we can do more nutrition classes with you, Wayne.
Yeah, I don't know how much more I have to give, but that's okay.
I agree.
We'll
We
talk about it.
appreciate it.
All right, let's pray. I'll pray, close it up.
Right.
Father in heaven, we thank you so much, Lord, for your mercy towards us. We thank you that you've given us bodies that are fearfully and wonderfully made. And Lord, help us to take these bodies, which are your temple, and treat them in the best way possible. And if we've abused them in any way, help us, Father, to overcome and to start moving in the right direction so that we might give honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.